3 disturbing true camping horror stories. Like and subscribe so you don't miss our next chilling horror story with new stories every week. I went on a solo camping trip last summer, partly to disconnect from the chaos of city life, but also because I had just gone through a nasty breakup and needed the space. I picked a small, lesser-known campground deep in the Pacific Northwest. It was remote, dense with pines, and far away from any town. Perfect. There were only 3 other campers when I arrived, all parked on the opposite side of the grounds. I didn't interact with them. I was there for solitude. I set up my tent near the tree line, just a few feet away from a small trail that, according to the map, looped into the woods and back around in about 3 miles. I made a mental note to try it the next morning. That night was peaceful. The kind of quiet that city folks never really hear. Just the rustling of trees, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the whisper of wind. Around midnight, I crawled into my sleeping bag and drifted off. I woke up at around 2:13 a.m., according to my phone. Something had crunched the leaves outside. I held my breath, thinking maybe it was a raccoon. I didn't move or unzip the tent, just listened. Crunch, crunch, then silence. Eventually, I heard the sounds fade. I told myself it was just wildlife and went back to sleep. The next morning, I found strange prints outside my tent. They weren't boot prints, that's for sure. They were barefoot, narrow heel, long toes, but larger than any human foot I'd ever seen. And the stride between each print was wrong. Too long, like whoever made them had extremely long legs or had been leaping. I laughed it off, sort of. Maybe one of the other campers was drunk and walking barefoot in the night. Still, I skipped the trail that day and stayed near my site. Night 2 came, and I was more on edge. I double-checked the zipper on my tent and placed my flashlight and camping knife beside me. Again, I fell asleep to the sounds of nature. I was woken again. This time not by footsteps, but by a whisper. It sounded like my name. Eli. Soft, almost like a breath against the fabric of the tent. I sat up fast and froze. The whisper came again, this time from the opposite side. Eli. Now I was fully awake, adrenaline surging. I grabbed my flashlight and flicked it on, casting it toward the sound. Nothing. I slowly unzipped the tent and shined the light outside. No one was there. But then I heard it again, behind me. Eli. I spun around, shining the light toward the trees. That's when I saw it. A shape. Not fully human. It stood about 7 feet tall, gaunt and pale, like stretched out skin over bone. No clothes, just the bare, trembling form of something that had a human shape, but not a human presence. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, like it was curious. Then it mimicked my voice. "Who's there?" it said, with the exact tone and panic I had used earlier. I didn't wait to see what it wanted. I ran. I left everything. The tent, the sleeping bag, my pack. I just bolted toward the main campground road. The sound of cracking branches behind me told me it was following. But it wasn't running. It was bounding. Long, almost rhythmic leaps, like some grotesque animal. I ran until I saw headlights. Another camper had been packing up their truck. I screamed for help, and he turned, startled, but let me into the passenger seat without a word once he saw my face. I didn't explain. I just asked him to drive. We drove 10 miles to a ranger station. I reported it. The ranger gave me a weird look, like he'd heard it before but wasn't allowed to say anything. All he told me was, "Stay in populated sites next time." When I went back the next afternoon, with backup, to grab my gear, everything was gone. No tent, no bag, no footprints, nothing. Just a single word etched into the dirt where my tent had been. Eli. Back in 2021, my buddy Marcus and I decided to take a weekend off and go camping in one of Oregon's lesser-known forest parks. We weren't seasoned campers or anything. We just wanted to disconnect for a bit. The place we picked had decent reviews online, and the campground was free. First come, first served. A little off the grid, but not dangerously remote. We got there late afternoon Friday, found a quiet spot about 50 yards off a dirt road, and set up our tents. There were maybe 2 other groups camped nearby, but you could barely hear them. It was peaceful. After grilling some burgers and drinking a couple of beers, we settled around a small fire, talking about nothing in particular. That night was uneventful. We heard some animal noises in the distance, maybe coyotes, but nothing too close. The weird part didn't start until the second night. We spent Saturday hiking and came back just before sundown. We were sitting by the fire again, finishing dinner, when we noticed something odd. Across from our site, maybe 30 feet into the tree line, there was a small pile of rocks. We hadn't seen it the day before, and it wasn't the kind of thing you'd miss. Marcus pointed it out. "You see that?" he asked. "Yeah. Weird," I said. "Maybe someone's just marking their spot?" But it didn't feel like that. The rocks were stacked deliberately, not like a trail marker, more like a shrine. There were 4 or 5 flat stones placed with strange symmetry, and what looked like a feather stuck into the top. I walked over to it, but before I could get close, I heard a voice, a man's voice. "Don't touch that." I froze. Out of the trees stepped this older guy, maybe mid-50s, wiry build, sun-beaten face. He was wearing a red flannel shirt and jeans, but no backpack or gear. I backed up slowly. "Sorry, didn't know it was yours." He didn't say anything, just stood there staring at me. Then he said, "This isn't a place you should be after dark." That was it. He turned around and disappeared back into the trees. I stood there for a second, trying to process what just happened. When I got back to the fire, Marcus was already packing up some stuff. "Dude," he said, "let's leave tomorrow morning, early." I agreed. That night, we stayed alert. Every snap of a twig made us flinch. Around 2:00 a.m., Marcus shook me awake. "Someone's walking around," he whispered. Sure enough, I could hear the crunch of leaves just outside our tents. Not fast, not panicked, just slow, deliberate steps circling us. Neither of us dared move. We just laid there, holding our breath. Eventually, the steps faded. I didn't sleep after that. In the morning, we packed up fast. Before we left, I went back to the place where the rocks had been. They were gone, completely. No feather, no stones. Just disturbed soil where they'd been stacked. On the way out, I asked one of the other campers, a guy in his 30s with his wife, if they'd seen anything weird. He gave me this look and said, "There's been stories about a guy out here. Shows up at random sites. No one knows if he's a squatter or just messed up. But people say he doesn't like company." I asked, "Anyone ever get hurt?" He shook his head. "No. But nobody sticks around long enough to find out." We got in the car and drove straight home. I haven't been camping since. And I never want to meet that guy again, whoever or whatever he was. Back in the summer of 2022, I decided to go on a solo camping trip through the Ouachita Mountains in Arkansas. I was in a rough patch, just out of a long relationship, burned out at work, and needing to disconnect from everything for a while. I'd camped solo before, but this was the first time I planned to spend several nights deep in a national forest, without any real contact with the outside world. The first 2 nights went exactly how I hoped. Quiet, peaceful, and borderline therapeutic. I'd hike, cook over the fire, write in my journal, then fall asleep to the sound of crickets. No signal, no noise, no stress. On the 3rd day, while following a lesser-used trail that veered off from the main path, I stumbled across something strange. At the bottom of a slope, partially hidden by trees, sat an old, rusted travel trailer. It looked like it hadn't moved in decades. The windows were either shattered or clouded with grime, and vines had started crawling up the sides. I thought maybe someone had abandoned it long ago. Still, there was something off about it. The trailer wasn't marked by any park signs. There was no cleared campsite around it, and it sat at an odd angle, like it had slid down the slope and never been retrieved. Curiosity got the best of me. I slid down the embankment and approached the trailer. The door was half open, creaking slightly in the breeze. I stood outside, debating whether to peek in. I told myself, it's probably just empty. Nothing to see, take a photo, leave. But the moment I stepped onto the metal stairs, the air changed. It wasn't just cooler, it felt thicker, heavier. Inside, it was unsettling. Old cans and wrappers littered the floor, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. But there were signs someone had been there more recently than the exterior suggested. A pile of relatively fresh firewood sat near a broken heater. An empty water jug. A worn flannel shirt draped over the back of the seat. The worst part? On the table was a notebook. I know I shouldn't have opened it. I really do. But I was already too far into the weirdness not to keep going. The entries were erratic, written by someone clearly deteriorating mentally. At first, the notes were about solitude, the beauty of the woods, the quiet. But slowly, they turned paranoid. The writer claimed they were being watched at night, that something knocked on the trailer at 3:13 a.m. every night. But when they looked out, no one was there. They tried to stay awake for it, even left food outside as bait. But nothing ever came. Just the knocks, always 3, always at 3:13. Then the writing just stopped. I don't know why I suddenly became hyper-aware of the time, but I pulled out my phone. No signal, but the clock read 2:42 p.m. As I left the trailer, something caught my eye in the brush about 30 feet away. It was a series of stacked rocks, deliberately balanced, about chest high. I looked around and noticed another, deeper in the woods, and another. It wasn't art. It wasn't random. It felt like a boundary, like a warning. I hiked back to my site much faster than I intended. That night, I kept hearing noises from the trees, sticks snapping, rustling leaves. I tried to tell myself it was raccoons or wind or my own nerves. But around 3 a.m., just as I was starting to doze off, I heard 3 soft thuds on the side of my tent. Not scratches, not brushing, thuds. Like someone pressing a fist into the fabric 3 times, deliberate, evenly spaced. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My flashlight was at my side, but I was too scared to reach for it. I just lay there, heart pounding, eyes wide, until morning light started filtering through the tent. When I finally crawled out, there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of an animal, no evidence I hadn't dreamed the whole thing. I packed up that morning and hiked out. I didn't even eat breakfast. Just shoved everything into my pack and left. Later, after I got home and regained cell service, I tried to look up any information about the trailer. Nothing came up. No missing person reports, no mentions in camping forums. I even posted about it once, just a vague account to see if anyone had seen the same thing. Someone replied privately. They said they'd seen that trailer too, 5 years earlier. Same place, same stacked stones. They'd gone inside, found the notebook. And they also left the next morning, after hearing 3 knocks on their tent. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe so you don't miss our next chilling horror story with new stories every week.